Hello and welcome to Cypresssoft Unify's webinar on keys to deploying Oracle Forms applications into a Java environment. This is your host, Matt Brunquell. Also with me today is Lorraine Ruddy, who will be doing the demonstration portion, which I'll introduce her at that point. One housekeeping item before we get started. We do welcome questions, and the way that you do that on this WebEx is you have a little WebEx toolbar, and one of the buttons on it has a little question mark. That's the Q&A button. So when you have a question, just press that button and post it. And then, as you'll see in the agenda, we have a Q&A section at the end after the demo where we'll go through all the questions. Now, there's also a chat section, but we ask that you just use the Q&A. Especially today, we have a lot of folks on here, and it's just going to be easier to make sure we get to all the questions if Lorraine and I just have one panel to go through, and we chose the Q&A one. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'd like to review our agenda. So the objective for today's presentation and demo is really to provide you with information on deploying Oracle Forms applications that have been migrated into the Java environment. Now we'll start with an introduction that includes an overview of Unify Cypresssoft and the frequent questions and challenges our customers face on migration projects in regards to deployment. For customers that decide to migrate their Oracle Forms applications to Java, one of the big questions is, okay, you've shown me a way to get the application over there, but what happens after I get there? And there are really two perspectives to this question. One is what happens from a development standpoint of maintaining and extending the application over there in Java, and then also what happens just from the basic deployment or operational perspective. And we'll take a look at both today. And then we'll follow this with a demonstration so you can really see how easy it can be to migrate and deploy an Oracle Forms application into a Java environment. And that'll be followed by the Q&A session that I referenced. So, first of all, just about the host today. Cypresssoft is a wholly owned subsidiary of Unify Corporation who has over 30 years of experience in database development tools and migration. And then we also have gotten into email archiving and e-discovery as well through an acquisition last year. But Cypresssoft has an established and really successful practice for modernizing Oracle Forms applications. That's what Cypresssoft is really all about. We're a member of the Oracle Modernization Alliance, or OMA, and for those of you that don't know, the OMA is an Oracle initiative really to help customers modernize their legacy applications and infrastructure. And Cypresssoft is the only member of the OMA with a focus on Oracle Forms. Also, for migrating Oracle Forms to Java, we're the only company to offer the choice of licensing a migration tool to do that and not just offering it as a service. These are the common questions that we hear from customers who are considering a migration option to Java for the Oracle Forms application. So I'll give you just a moment to read those. And, kind of what we see, customers have built very successful applications in Oracle Forms, but they're looking to modernize them in today's technologies to keep them relevant. And there are several options that they look at that include, one, web enabling the application through an upgrade to Forms 10G or 11, rewriting the application, or automated migration. And each has their pros and cons to consider depending on the customer requirements. And Cypresssoft offers services around all of these options, and choosing the right path or the right option out of these is really a webinar topic in itself. In fact, we've done a webinar on it, and we'll probably do more on that case. But for today's webinar, we're going to focus on data points around the bottom two questions, which is how will I maintain and extend the application in Java, and is there an easy path to J2EE for the developers? Now, as mentioned earlier, there's a development perspective and a deployment perspective to these questions. And we're going to start with the development perspective. So customers are really looking to reduce their development and deployment costs by consolidating their technology platforms. And many have chosen Java as that primary platform moving forward. However, there's a lot of uncertainty, if you will, around all of the components in a Java platform that will be needed to achieve the same results as what was done in the self-contained Oracle Forms environment. Oracle Forms really did a lot for you in terms of those applications that you built. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more. And, another factor, though, besides just kind of consolidating the development platforms, is consolidation of the staff skill sets. So, it's been said out there, talking to some CIOs, one made a comment I always remember. He's like, Oracle Forms developers are not getting any younger. And the workforce coming out of the education system is not really being taught or proficient in Forms. So organizations, or at least some organizations, are looking to leverage their Java development staff. And then other organizations really want to not just do that, but they want to find an easier path to Java than JDeveloper or other Java IDEs out there for their Forms developers. And the reason why they want to do that is they really want to leverage the experience and knowledge those Forms developers have in the applications that are to be migrated. Now, these are the key challenges from that developer's perspective when they're looking at taking an Oracle Forms application, really any application, into Java or any other low-level coding approach. So it's retaining the business logic, ensuring the Java code generated or rewritten, whichever option you choose, is clean, maintainable, and structured, and then allowing for a similar look and feel or behavior of the original application. So a migrated application should be as intuitive, whether it's for the original developers of the application to maintain in the new environment, or whether it is for developers who have no experience in the original application. And practically speaking, what this means is your path to Java should provide a one-to-one conversion in the code as much as this is possible. And in addition, you see I've got that kind of sub-bullet on the third item there. The impact on the end users of the application do need to be considered as well, because reproducing all the functionality of the application is not enough. We find it really needs to behave similarly over in the new environment, in order to avoid retraining on the application. Especially, when you have a lot of end users on an application, especially some of these Oracle Forms apps that are very successful and run, critical parts of the business, there's a lot of users on them. There's really a lot of cost savings in moving your application over if you can minimize that retraining. And that similar behavior can also really minimize the risk of the project in terms of minimizing that user frustration and just speeding up the adoption of the migrated application. I'll give you a second here to look at this, these visuals on the slide here. What this graphic really illustrates is some of the keys to creating a path for the developers involved in a migration project. And this goes for both whether they're the original Forms developer or the Java developers. So talking about that clean, structured code, but also doing it in a way that's going to make it easy to maintain and extend moving forward. So, part of being able to do that, in addition to producing clean Java code, keeping the file structure of the components and the objects organized, much as they were in Oracle Forms, provides a reference point, both for the original Forms developer and for the Java developers, that they can both follow. So for the Oracle Forms developers, what this does is it really eases that learning curve into Java, because they're very familiar with the app. They now have these reference points of how they're used to seeing things, and now they can really look at, they can concentrate on the Java code itself in there. For Java developers who really, most of the ones that we work with are really accustomed to low-level programming. What this structure provides is a higher-level view, of a database-driven business application that they now have to manage. It gives them an organized way to look at the various objects and so forth without just looking at from a very low-level basic construct stage, although they need to be able to do that as well. Another key, so that last slide we were talking about some of the keys from the developer perspective. I like to use this illustration here on another key that's really often overlooked when you're moving your Oracle Forms applications over into Java, and that's the Oracle Forms framework itself. So the left-hand side of this illustration is a high-level representation of an Oracle Forms application. You see the user interface, the business logic, the database and data access, and really I should have a fifth box, and if you will, imagine the green rectangle around all of those objects as the fifth box, which is the Oracle Forms framework. And that framework automatically handles, and you guys at Oracle Forms folks know this, that framework automatically handles things that are used repeatedly in most Oracle Forms applications. These are things like trigger execution logic, global and system variables, synchronization between fields on the screen and fields in the database, data access, etc. And providing this framework is really what gave Oracle Forms developers such a high level of productivity. The implementation details of the framework were transparent, so the developer could focus on the business logic. Now, in a migration to Java or any other low-level programming language, these basic components are still needed for every Oracle Forms application. And recreating these basic components of the Oracle Forms framework itself would require a lot of low-level coding. I mean, you can imagine just to handle the basic operations like synchronization between fields on the screen and fields in the database, just doing all of that coding before even getting to, all right, the business logic and the process flow and the higher level business requirements of the application itself. There's all this underlying plumbing, if you will. And that's one of the benefits, actually, and why we're focusing on the automated solution approach in our demonstration today. That's the benefit of an automated migration solution, is that all of this has been handled. What's provided in that Oracle Forms framework is stuff that's repeatedly used. So having that in automated migration can provide huge savings. We've been in projects where it's provided a 90% reduction in the time and thus cost versus a rewrite of those underlying components. And what you see, though, there in this picture is that all of those components do need to be recreated over on the Java side. So let's move from the developer perspective to the deployment perspective for Oracle Forms apps over into Java. Now, before we look at deployment in the Java application, just to set a reference point, let's look at a basic deployment in Oracle Forms. Now, again, this is a very high-level representation. We've seen, well, I want to say we've seen it all, but I guess we can't say we've seen it all, but we've seen a lot of different deployment things out there. This is just a basic one in the Oracle Forms 6i. It seems like there's still a large amount of Oracle Forms people on 6i. And we'll use this picture just to help illustrate the basics of deployment. So typically there's at least a separate development environment and production environment. In many cases there's also a staging or testing environment as well. But the developer built their Forms application, which consisted of several different types of files. So the FMBs, the PLLs, the MMBs, and the OBJs, and once the development and testing were completed, the application was compiled, except for the OBJ, into these these compiled files. So the FMB became the FMX, and then there's the PLX and the MMX. And all of these compiled files and the OBJ, are then moved to the file server where they're made accessible to the clients. And that's really the basics of deploying in Oracle Forms. But there's also another thing that we see a lot out there, which is, a lot of customers are doing partial deployment in the Oracle Forms environment as well. So, and this ranges from some customers who are modifying the applications on a daily basis to other customers doing partial deployment where there's just certain time periods during the year where their changes are being made frequently. So like, during a budget period or during tax time, or some examples I've seen where all of a sudden there's this, just constant modification going into the app. And in Oracle Forms, just parts of the application that have been modified can be redeployed, whether it's a form, a library, or a menu. So, for example, the developer would make a change to the form, he'd test it, recompile it, and deploy that FMX file to the file server, replacing the old one. And then next time a user accessed the form, it would just access that updated FMX. But the associated menus and libraries, the MMX, PLX, all of that in the form didn't have to be recompiled because he put that new FMX out there. So now going over to the Java side, when an Oracle Forms app is migrated to Java, the application is deployed into an application server environment, so such as Oracle 10G or the Oracle 11, which is the Oracle Fusion, or Tomcat as an example. And so what you see here is just an example of what do those little files look like instead of the instead of having the FMB, the MMB, and so forth. The steps required in that deployment process can vary based on the network and security requirements. You'll see that application servers will have some default settings for deployment, but again, if it's you're going beyond your firewall, it's an internet type of application, or users you want to be able to access outside of the intranet, if you will. There's all kinds of additional parameters for security that that you can incorporate for like single sign-on and encryption, all of that. But kind of going back to this picture, in Java, the application is compiled into a collection of files, just like in Oracle Forms. It's just they are now different extensions and different types of files that have the Java code, the classes as opposed to the libraries. And at deployment time, these are zipped up, if you will, into what's called a WAR file. And that's what gets deployed to the application server. So instead of having all the different files pushed out to the server, they're all zipped up into a WAR file. And that's what gets deployed out to the app server. And what you find out there with organizations that have these Java application servers, so for those of you that have them, a lot of times the folks that manage that infrastructure, they actually have a process in place for how they deploy, how the WAR files get deployed out there to the application server. Now, but for some folks that are newer to Java, they don't have that. And what Cypresssoft does, we actually provide simple step-by-step instructions for deploying, at least the applications have been migrated with our solutions. We have simple step-by-step instructions for deploying those WAR files, onto the Oracle application servers, onto some of the different versions, as well as the Tomcat. So, it's something that can be documented and done very easily and quickly, and we provide that to our customers. Now, we talked about partial deployment in Oracle Forms, and so I want to take a moment and talk about that here in the deployment perspective as well. And a different approach really has to be used for partial deployment on the Java side for applications that are modified frequently, once they're in Java. Because, partial deployment cannot be done in Java like how it was done in the Oracle Forms scenario because of that zipped up WAR file, if you will. So instead, what we see organizations doing to have that partial deployment requirement over on the Java side, they're using their source management software to manage the build release process, and they use that to help do, to help really manage that. Okay, we're doing frequent modifications to the application because many of the source management solutions out there have a utility or mechanism that can automate the process of the build. So you've got developers, checking in and checking out pieces of the or the various files that make up the application and doing modifications, that's getting checked in and checked out with the source management. And then there's utility or mechanism that can be used to kind of automate the process of using, rebuilding or zipping those files up on a daily basis or whatever the regular basis needs to be, and getting that pushed out to the application server. And this can be done and set up so that you don't have to do a lot of manual, introduce a lot of manual intervention into redeploying those frequent builds out there. And they're able to do that quite successfully and deal with that difference in partial deployment. Now, I thought at this point, I've been doing a lot of talking and going through the slides. I thought it would be good to actually do a demonstration where we demonstrate some of these deployment concepts. And I think that will help actually show you, how an application can be deployed over on the Java side in Oracle Forms apps. And so some things to keep in mind during the demo. What we'll do first of all is, because we have an automated solution, we'll actually start with an Oracle Forms app and the Oracle Summit application and do a conversion of that and then deploy it. Now, the Oracle Summit app is, when you look at it, it's not going to look as complex as some of your apps out there, although for some of you it may be. But do keep in mind, I mean, it's not just a form out there. It has menus and libraries and business logic in it, and you'll see that. We'll do a full conversion, so it's going to convert everything, the menus, the libraries, the forms, the data access, the Oracle framework, if you will, the Oracle Forms framework. But note, so we're going to do that full conversion so we can deploy it. But note that you can also, with this migration solution, you can actually just do pieces of the application. So you could do just the PL SQL. There's actually a little box you can check and just convert the PL SQL. We also have the ability to give you where you're doing, you may just want to use pieces of the converted, like you just want the business logic or you just want the user interface. That can be done as well. But for this one, we're just going to do the full conversion. When we get it converted over, before we deploy it, Lorraine will walk you through a little bit of what the converted app looks like. And so just notice how that structure and hierarchy we talked about and the keys to the developer perspective is maintained. And we also do a like-for-like migration, which you'll see. But for those of you, we have customers where that's really what they want. They want that like-for-like. Their whole idea or their whole approach is give us the like-for-like for the initial migration over into the platform. Their priority is to get over to the new platform and minimize the user disruption. And then over a second phase or longer period, they look at modernizing it, if you will. But we have some customers who that's really one of the priorities for the migration in the first place, is they want to modernize it right when they get it over. And somehow they're able to set the expectations with the users to accept the changes in the new look and feel. And that can be done also, and we're not going to do that in this demo today because we want to talk more about the deployment. But you can actually, with this solution, migrate, not do a like-for-like, but you can actually, we'll take user-defined templates of a new, web modernized look and feel and migrate it into that as well. And then the last thing, because we'll always get asked, well, what Java application environment are you deploying into for the demo? We're using Tomcat in this case. It's just probably the smallest footprint, one of the smallest footprints and easiest application servers to maintain on our demo laptops. It doesn't require as much administration and hand-holding. So we'll use that, but this can be done on any of the Oracle app servers, as well as some additional ones as well. It's very flexible in its deployment environment, and we'll spend some time talking to you about what's actually going on in the deployment. Now with that, I want to go ahead and introduce who's going to be demonstrating this for us today, which is Lorraine Ruddy. Now Lorraine Ruddy is up in our Calgary office, which is where most of our technical resources are for the Cypresssoft product, and she's the manager of our technical resources for the implementations that we do. So she manages the technical services and projects for that. And so she's seen a lot out there, and it's a great opportunity to have her actually demoing this, because she's seen what some of the different things you guys have out there for deploying to Java. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lorraine.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead then and share my desktop, and I'm going to walk through these steps that Matt just outlined for us. So we're going to start with the Summit application. As Matt said, this is an Oracle application. It's running under Oracle Forms 6i. It's a relatively simple application. But it's fairly representative of what you find in Oracle Forms applications. It has 3 different forms in it. It has a couple of the PL/SQL libraries. It has a menu, has a tabbed canvas, all things that are typical of Forms applications. So this is the application running under Oracle Forms. This is the application that we're going to convert. And when we finish the conversion, then I'll be able to show you the Java application with a very similar look and feel as the Oracle Forms application. The Summit application is an application that's provided by Oracle. Some of you may have seen it before. It gets used often in tutorials and training and things like that. So that's the Summit application. Let's started our Exodus converter. This is the automatic tool that Matt referred to, which converts forms, menus, and libraries from Forms applications from 6i up. Any of the older versions that are out there, I know some people are still running version 3, 4.5. They can also be converted to Java with this converter, although we make it kind of a 2-step process. We upgrade those older versions to 6, and then from 6 we go to Java. So this is the user interface for the converter tool. There are just a few options that you can set, things like whether you want to convert the actual packages that are stored in your database, whether you're using reference forms. Often applications use reference forms to contain things like common visual attributes or common pieces of business logic that they want to use or make use of in several forms throughout the application. So there are a few options that we can set, and then the rest of this information, there's just this one page for the user interface. We set some things like what type of presentation layer are we going to create? Are we going to create just a plug-in version, an applet that runs in a browser or as a desktop application, or are we going to create an HTML page? Where the input files are for our conversion, where we want to create the new generated Java classes, and what our database connection info is. So I'm going to go ahead and start the conversion process. We typically recommend that we start with the libraries because they're the common pieces of the application. These are the PL/SQL libraries, and so as I mentioned, there are a couple of them within this Summit application, so we'll select both of them. We'll go ahead and convert them. And it's simply going through a process. It parses through, creates all the appropriate Java classes. At the end of every conversion step that I take, I get this conversion report, which simply tells me what did I convert, when did I convert it, and was the conversion successful or not. In this case, both of these libraries converted successfully. If there was a problem with the conversion, I'd get a message in that report that indicated in which file there was a problem, and some kind of indicator as to what the problem was, so that I could go back then and rectify that and reconvert that piece. So I converted the libraries. Now I'm going to pick up the menu. I'm going to convert it. Like I said, we convert the 3 different types of modules in Forms applications: libraries, menus, and the forms. So again, I have the report that says my menu converted successfully. And finally, I'm going to pick up the forms. And as Matt also mentioned, there are various steps within converting the forms, and I can run any of these steps singly, or I can run the full form conversion, which in this case, because I haven't converted these forms in this session, I want both the user interface, I want the business logic, I want everything above that form to be converted. So I'll go ahead and I'll choose the form conversion option, and I'll pick the 3 forms that are within that Summit application, select them, and I'll say to convert them. In this demonstration today, this conversion process runs fairly quickly. In the total of about 3 or 4 minutes, really, we're through all the pieces of the conversion. Again, this is not a huge application. The larger your forms are, the larger your libraries are, the longer this process will take. We've had some very complex, huge forms that may take several minutes to run through the converter. And the other thing to note is that in this particular case, these forms, all of the functionality within these forms is fully supported by the automatic converter, so I'm not going to have to go in and modify anything to make these forms actually run. You'll see them come right up. But in most cases, there's some manual modification required, maybe just a few lines. In a truly complex form, it may be the automatic converter may do somewhere between 80 and 95% of the work, and there's some piece of manual intervention that's required, but it gets you the majority of the way there. So the very last step, once we finish converting everything, generating all the Java classes, in order to be able to deploy it, as Matt mentioned, we want to be able to create a WAR file, a web archive file, and that's what we can then deploy on whatever application server we choose to use. So the very last step here is this generation step, and this is going to take all of the generated Java classes that we've just created, plus all of the Java classes that were written that really kind of emulate that Oracle Forms runtime, the common pieces that get used again and again and again. What to do when a trigger needs to be set up, when a query needs to be executed, those types of things. Those are all Java classes that are a part of this Exodus product that are already written. So this generate step takes all of the Java classes and creates the WAR file. We've got a message here now that says that WAR file has been created successfully. So now I can take that WAR file and I can deploy it on whatever app server I happen to be using. Now in this particular case, I'm going to bring up, I've started the JDeveloper on my machine. This is, you can use any IDE that supports the Java structure. Happen to be using JDeveloper, that's what we use in-house here. And the way that we deploy a WAR file is we set up a new project. So I've set one up already that's called Summit Plugin 2010. And what I've done is I've set up a deployment profile. And if we just look at the properties of this profile, you'll see where I've set some defaults. This is where my WAR file is going to be created, an EAR file, what my application name is, where the root directory is going to be. So once I set up this profile, because the process, what will happen is you'll load this new WAR file, we'll deploy it once in this project in JDeveloper, and then what will happen is you'll deploy it, we'll compile it, we'll run it, we'll test it, we'll say, oh, we'd like to make a few changes, and that becomes an iterative process. So we make changes, we deploy it on our app server, we test it out, we make more changes, we deploy it again, we test it out, we go around and around with that. So by setting up a couple of things like this deployment profile, then all of our defaults are set to reuse each time. So I have this deployment profile, and I've got the WAR file in this new project, so now I can simply say deploy to the WAR file, because I've specified in my profile where that WAR file is at. So I choose to deploy it. You'll see down here in the bottom right corner, the deployment has started. It will actually go through the process of compiling. We'll get a message here that indicates the compilation has completed. And this just takes a minute or two. And again, this can be done with any IDE that you happen to be using. Okay, so we've got a message here now that the deployment is finished. So if I go back to my desktop, as Matt said, we're going to use the Tomcat server here just because it's easy to install and maintain on the laptop. So I'm going to go ahead and start Tomcat. And what this does then is it takes the deployed application, puts it out there. So now when I start up my new plugin, my desktop application with plugin, it now has the latest results of the latest WAR file that I've just deployed. So every time I change the WAR file, then I deploy it, I redeploy it under redeploy it, and then start Tomcat, and I get the latest version of it. So this will just take a minute to get this started. And as Matt also mentioned, you can use any application server that supports Java. So we use Tomcat. We've deployed under Oracle Application Server. We've deployed under WebSphere. Any application server at all that supports the Java environment. This is pure Java code that's been generated. Okay, so once we have Tomcat started, I'm going to go ahead. I've got an application set up here, or a shortcut. This will bring up the actual generated Summit application. So this is the after results of our conversion. Go ahead and start it up. Okay, I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller so that I can bring up both the before and the after, just so you can see the two of them. Okay, so this was our, in the top left corner here, this was our Oracle Forms version of the Summit application. And here in the forefront now on the right-hand side of your screen is the converted Java application of the Summit application. So you'll see that it's very similar in how it looks to the original Oracle Forms application. Same functionality. Fonts are a little bit different. Colors might be a little bit different, but for the most part, it's identical look and feel and functionality. So the other part of this then is that I just wanted to mention was, like I said, this is an iterative process. So I normally would go through, I might do some testing on this application. If I wanted to change something, I would come back to my IDE. The sources are here as a result of creating the project with the WAR file. Under the application sources, I can see the hierarchy that's been created that is similar to what you would have seen in the Oracle Forms environment. Matt, early in his presentation, referred to trying to generate code that both the Oracle Forms developers and the Java developers could follow and understand. So we support a lot of the similar, or use a similar structure when we're generating the Java code that if you were an Oracle Forms developer, you would have been familiar with. So here I have forms, and within the forms I have blocks, and within the blocks I have items. And at each level, there are Java classes that are out there. And if we look at any one of these Java classes, we'll see a similar structure where there's the import statement, then it sets the properties at that particular level. It doesn't have any actual particular code in it, but we can pull up another one. And again, the other thing that's key to remember here is that all of this code, the nomenclature from the Oracle Forms application, has been maintained. So item names, stored procedure names, trigger names, all of those things would be recognizable from the Oracle Forms side. I'm just scrolling briefly through the code here, just so you can get a sense of what the generated code looks like. It's clean, maintainable code. It's not, there's no randomly generated item names or anything like that. Fairly easy to read. All of the comments from the original Oracle Forms application are migrated over, so you have that documentation, if you will, that goes along with it. Matt, do we have any questions in the Q&A side at this point? This would be a good time to open it up for questions and answers.
All right. Well, what we'll do is we'll start the Q&A session now then. And remember, just on your WebEx toolbar, the button with the question mark, if you could please use that so that Lorraine and I can track all of the questions. It'll make it easier. We'll go silent for just a minute to give you a chance to enter the questions, and then we'll start. We'll come back on in a minute and start going through those and answering them.
I'm just working my way through this converted application just to show you all the various types of things that are supported, the tree structure and tabs and the list of values, things like that.
All right, we're going to go ahead and start going through the questions. So the first question is, well, it kind of got cut off. Let's see here. You mentioned that at times manual intervention is required after the conversion process. Is there a document that lists which issues there are?
Would you like me to take that, Matt?
Sure. Why don't you? I'll add in where needed. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. We have an analyzer tool actually that we like to run against the applications, and we can do this whether we're going to do the conversion or whether you're going to do the conversion. But that gives us a kind of a heads up in advance as to what functions might be in your application that we don't currently support. And depending on what the function is, some of the things are easier to deal with on the Oracle Forms side prior to doing the conversion. And some things are easier to deal with once the conversion is done and you simply modify the Java code. So we like to do that type of analysis before we do the conversion. Things like go-to statements that are used in Oracle Forms applications, there's just no equivalent for that on the Java side. So we like to take those out of the logic before we ever do the conversion. And as far as a list as to what's unsupported, we like to kind of deal with them on a case-by-case basis, because depending on what the need is within your application, in a lot of cases, there's some functionality. Some of the older libraries in Oracle, like the D2KWUtil, which is no longer even supported in the later releases of Oracle Forms, like 10G. Those types of things we like to look at. What kind of functionality is actually being used? And is it something that's still going to be required in the new environment? And if it is, whether it's bringing up a web application or whether it's looking at timers or things like that, there's just a whole variety of ways that those things can be resolved. And the discussion has to happen about whether it's even necessary. So it's kind of a long answer, but there's not really a clean-cut kind of list that says these will never be dealt with, therefore you need to deal with them manually. It's kind of a list that grows, if that's the right word, or is kind of maintained on a regular basis.
Yeah, good. No, that's good. And just to add to that, kind of two things. First is an example, like on the go-to statements. A lot of times we see, go-to statements for error handling on the Oracle Forms side. And so, over on the Java side, usually the recommended approach is you use try-catch in Java to do your error handling. So just to give you a specific example, but then going to the process side of it that kind of Lorraine touched on with the analyzer, we do have this analyzer component as part of the Exodus suite. And so with any customer, whether they're buying the migration tool from us or they're using our services that assist with the migration, we'll run that analyzer with you even before you make your decision, so you can really see, okay, how much of this is going to convert, what is the effort going to look like. We work with you with that so that you know what you're walking into. And then also, as Lorraine mentioned, there's things, we've run into a lot of stuff. I mean, we've been doing this with the migration tool. This is not a new tool. It's been around for quite a while. And so there's not a lot that surprises us, but we do still find the occasional thing where it's like, oh yeah, that's something that we should incorporate into the tool to the conversion of that should be automated as part of the tool, as opposed to, okay, this is something where a decision needs to be made on what's the best approach in Java. And so we'll incorporate that into the tool during your project. So, just to provide a little bit of perspective on that. All right, next question. Does your conversion process pre-populate any source code control?
No. And I say that we're not tying it to any specific source code control product, and obviously there are several different products out there that various people use for source control. So there's no tie to any one specific product.
Great. Well, that was a lot shorter answer than your last one, Lorraine. Okay, next question. As part of the conversion, are there any tools part of the software development lifecycle populated? So like ANT scripts, UML diagrams, etc.
And again, the answer is no. There are lots of third-party tools out there in the Java world, in the open source world, for doing all those types of things. So yeah, we're not tying into any one specific tool. We're just creating standard Java code, which then can be used with any of those. There's all kinds of tools that do optimization of code and all those types of things, and any of those tools out there would work on this.
Yeah, and that's one of the benefits of having this migrated over into Java. Now, you can use any of those with this because, as Lorraine just mentioned, I mean, it's Java code now, and you can integrate in with any of it. But we're not doing specific integration into any specific tool because we found in the Java world everybody has their own flavor of something. So, but you even see in the demos, Lorraine talks about how we're using JDeveloper, but there's lots of other Java IDEs our customers are using this in. Okay, next question. Do you have a demo of a J3E conversion with ADF faces instead of swing? And actually, can we go back to the slide piece? Hold on one sec, because that's a good question. I was thinking about this. I'm just going to go back to a slide and talk about that for a second. Here we go. So we do have a demo conversion to ADF, and not just to Java Swing. And we don't have time to do that in this demo today, but actually in our webinar next month, we're going to focus on the different GUI options you have when you migrate over to Java. So in this diagram that I showed, you see that client representation on the left-hand side. You actually have, with our solution, you have all these different GUI choices that you can do. And, the one we happened to show was Lorraine, which one was it? Was it the browser using the Exodus plugin?
I just showed the desktop application using the plugin, and I can quickly show the ADF Faces version if we have enough time when you're finished.
Okay, well, let's go through the questions, and if we have enough time, we'll do it. But if not, we're actually going to do a webinar next month, really focus on, okay, what are your different GUI options over on the Java side? And they're basically XML or HTML choices with our solution. And what are the pros and cons of each? Because there are some considerations on which one you should go with. Now, the nice thing is with Exodus, you could migrate different forms with different options. You may have some where it makes more sense to have it as browser-based with no plugin. You may have others where it may make sense and there is no impact to keep it as a plugin in the browser, or even a Java Swing, pure Java Swing client, and so forth. Okay, next question. We have a very complex forms application with many very complicated forms. Okay, so it's complicated. Do you offer a service where we could demo your migration solution against some of our more complex forms to see if this is feasible for us? The answer to that is yes. Again, what we would do, there's a couple things that we can look at and do. First of all, as I talked, both Lorraine and I talked about the analyzer component. We could run an analyzer against those and provide the results of, okay, here's what it would look like to convert. And then we could actually do some kind of conversion. But what we would do is we would look at, with the analyzer, what effort would be involved to convert it, and see just how much effort's involved and what you really want to see. Like if you wanted to see the form fully functioning, that's one thing versus, hey, we want to look at the code and what the visual objects look like converted. So we would sit there and talk with you about, okay, what is the proof of concept, if you will, that we really need to do here for you to make your decision. And then based on the effort involved around that, we would decide, okay, that's going to take us a day. We'll do that for you versus, well, that might take a couple days, and that's using resources, so there would be some costs associated with that. But we're more than happy to work with you and look at what makes sense so that you can make a decision as quickly as possible to move your project forward. Okay, next one. Can you show some converted Java code where the original code contains some relatively complex validation? That is, open a cursor and check values against the database. It just would be good to see how this is converted to Java.
If you turn it back to me, Matt, I can at least show some code where we go out and do a kind of fetch the data from the database. Let me see if I can get to that fairly quickly here.
Okay. Well, we're turning it back over to you now so you can bring the product up and show that.
Okay. Do you see my JDeveloper now?
It just popped up, yeah.
Okay. So I just went out to what I have here in front of me now is an actual select statement where we're actually going out and doing a query on the database. There's a few lines here that are involved. As for, and if I just scroll up a little bit, you'll see where it's, again, this is a select statement that's getting executed. There are some triggers in here. The actual, this is the code that's generated from the specifics, the pieces of the application that are specific to the application itself. The Java classes that are written, that we wrote, that provide the kind of repeated generic functionality, like what to do when every time a trigger gets called. Those are in some separate library classes that I don't have access to. Those pieces I can't actually show you, but those are the kind of general pieces that are in these libraries that are imported at the start of each package. each class. Is that helpful?
Yes, that's great. All right, next question. Does it generate a standalone code library that I can use it in exclusion to extend, customize the original forms application? Does that make sense? That was a little bit broken English, but...
I don't know that you would use it for extending the forms application. It certainly gives you a standalone, the Java classes that are generated provide you, once you've converted the application, absolutely everything you need to maintain and take that application forward in the Java environment is there and completely maintainable by you. But that's on the Java side. I'm not sure about I'm not sure why the question about on the forms side. The point behind it is to move everything from the forms application or the forms runtime over to the Java environment.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Where is the best place to get documentation on the conversion process?
I would say probably I would start with the information that's provided on our website. There are several white papers there, and perhaps if you need something more detailed than that, you could contact maybe Matt directly, and we could come up with the specifics of what it is exactly you'd like to see.
Okay. So we can follow up with you and see, and I'll bring up the website link too here when we're done on the last slide. But it's cyphersoftinc.com, and it's pretty easy to find you'll find the white papers that Lorraine is referring to. And then we can also, depending on what you're looking for on the step-by-step of the conversion process, if that doesn't give you what you need, we're more than happy to make sure we understand what you want and provide that to you. Okay, another question, I think it's kind of along the lines of the ADF. Can we deploy it as a web application? Absolutely, and if we have time again, we'll demo it here at the end of the Q&A. We still have some questions to get to, but if we do run out of time, we'll be doing it in the webinar next month. Okay, next question. Sorry, maybe my misunderstanding of your offering, but do you perform the conversion of the code and then we maintain going forward, or do we as a client buy your Exodus app and convert code ourselves? So the answer to that is yes, to both. In other words, we offer a couple different options. We can sell you our migration tool, Exodus, which you saw Lorraine using to convert the app. And you can use the tool yourself and do the conversion on your own. We provide training on the tool as well as support, but you can do that. And we have customers that have done that. They'll go through the 3 to 5 days of training and then they're on their way. We also though offer services. Some folks don't have the resources to do the conversion themselves, and they'll ask us to do it. And and we use the tool to do it, and as a result, we're very competitive or very cheap, if you will, to do a migration as opposed to a rewrite, because as part of our services, we'll use our own tool for you. And sometimes we're doing a combination of both. The customer says, well, why don't you do this first one for us so we can see how it's done by someone who uses it a lot. And then from there, they'll take it on their own. So we can do either approach or a blend of it, depending on what your needs are. Okay, next question. Is your company and or product going to be represented at the ODTUG Kaleidoscope Conference? And the answer to that is yes. In fact, I've got a list of some of the upcoming Oracle events that we're at, but we go to as many as we can and that we are invited to. The founder of Cypresssoft, Jennifer McNeil, speaks at many of these as well. In fact, I'm sure some of you have seen her or met her before. And if you do get a chance to hear her speak, I recommend it. Okay, next question. Can I deploy it as a web service? I'm going to give that one to you, Lorraine.
Okay. I'm not quite sure how to answer that. You know, the ADF offering is a straight HTML page, so that would imply to me that it could be deployed as a web service.
Yeah,
without some further details around that.
Yeah, depending on what you want to do. I mean, because you get all the Java code and classes, it depends on what you want to deploy as a web service. You know, Exodus doesn't automatically package up different portions like the data access or the business logic. You know, you can't press a button and it'll package it up for you as a web service. But because it is a Java code and you do get it, there is, you know, you can, if you know how to do your web services, you can put the wrappers around this, you know, the WSDLs and so forth, and do it. We also have done sometimes folks want to deploy the app as a portlet, like within the Fusion, and I'm trying to remember what Oracle's calling the portal solution in their Fusion stack. Do you remember, Lorraine?
I don't right off the top, Matt. No, sorry.
Okay, but we've done some integration there as well, so that you could deploy this into a portal as well, and in fact into that Oracle Fusion portal. And the name will come to me probably 10 minutes after we get off this webinar, but that's something we'll probably demonstrate in a future thing as well. Next question. So that I should be able to use it in non-Java environments. Oh, I guess, okay. So I think that's elaborating on the question about deploying it as a web service so that someone could access the functionality in a non-Java environment. Absolutely. Again, because it's Java code, you can, depending on what you want to expose out there, you can deploy, you know, put the WSDL and the web services wrappers around the pieces you need and do that. Now, you know, you're going to have some technical capability in web services to do it, but again, you get all of this code, the Java code, the classes, the libraries, so you have the ability, if you have the ability to do it, you have the code moving forward. I mean, that application is there for you to maintain and extend moving forward. There's no, you know, there's no being held to Cypresssoft code or anything once you have it. So we give you all the libraries and everything so that you can go on your way. And there's no dependence. I think we are over our hour. I think we still have a lot of folks on. Have we gone through all of our questions? Yes, it looks like it. So what we're going to do is wrap this up. And I think because we're over our time, Lorraine, we're not going to show the ADF deployment for this one. But as you'll see in a second, I'll give you the time for the next webinar. But if it's something that you want to see before then, we're more than happy to set up a demo for your organization or for you, and we can show you that web deployment before the webinar next month. So we'll have a unified Cypresssoft representative follow up with you. So I just want to go to, hold on one sec, I'm going to go off of this slide. Just to summarize what we saw today, we talked about the keys to deployment over taking an Oracle Forms application and getting it into Java and deploying it over in the Java environment. So just from the migration standpoint, as you can see, we've got something for converting your application over into Java, and it converts the entire app. As Lorraine mentioned, there are things that where you have to make decisions on what's the best way to get it over that will require some manual intervention. But certainly, we have seen on many projects from customers and their business cases, it's a 90% reduction in time and thus programming costs. We talk about the key challenges or the keys to deploying over in the Oracle Forms environment, both from a deployment and a developer perspective. I think one of the big ones is this maintaining the structure and hierarchy of the Oracle Forms project in the Java code. That's key whether you are an Oracle Forms developer trying to ease into the Java learning curve but it gives you a way to maintain that app once it's migrated. Or whether you're a Java developer, you've got this app that's been migrated into Java and you don't know Oracle Forms, or you don't know the app, I should say. It gives you a structured way to go through it and leverage the Oracle Forms resources you have to help you get acquainted with the app you now have to maintain and extend in Java. And then the deployment, as you saw, Lorraine walked through the deployment steps. It doesn't have to be complicated. She talked about how you go through this iterative process of development and testing and deployment, and just about packaging the files up. It's a very similar process to what you did in Oracle Forms. It's just a new environment. And again, we have step-by-step on how to do that if you're using our solution into some of the different environments of the Oracle Forms app server as well as Tomcat. Well, Lorraine and I want to thank you for attending the webinar today. We hope you found it useful. When you exit the webinar, you'll get a little survey response form. Please take a moment and tell us what you thought and what you think. Was this what you expected? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? And are there things that you'd like to see in upcoming webinars? This webinar is something that came out of the ones we've been doing. It came as a request from some of the customers and prospects we speak with. So we definitely want to do topics that are relevant for you. Some of the upcoming events, we're going to be at SEOUC, which is actually this week. In fact, our founder of Cypresssoft will be there, Jennifer McNeil. And then our next webinar is next month, March 24th. And again, it's all around that Oracle Forms GUI over in Java when you migrate it, and what are the different options, which we kind of showed on that slide. And we'll actually show the migrated app in the ADF faces where it's just a browser. But it's really all about HTML versus XML and some of the choices and decisions that will help you decide which is the best way to go for you on your Oracle Forms apps that you're migrating. We're going to be at Collaborate in Las Vegas in April. We'll have a booth there, and I'm not sure if we're speaking or not. I don't think we have a speaking engagement at that one, but we will have a booth there. And we're actually we'll be over near the ERP folks, the Oracle application folks. And then we're at the Utah. I noticed there's a few folks from Utah on the webinar today. We will be at the Utah Oracle User Group in May. And if some of you folks are running user groups out there and would like for us to present to your group, we are more than happy to look at that and work with you and see what makes sense. Also, we are going to be, I'm getting a little message here, hold on, this is the beauty of live presentations. We are going to be at ODTUG in Washington, D.C. in June as well. So I only went as far as May. But as you can see, we're very active in the Oracle space. You're going to see us in some form or another in the Oracle space every month pretty much. All right, with that, thanks, Lorraine. Great job on the demo. Thank you all for attending. And we'll follow up with you to see what you thought and if there's anything we can do for you for next steps. Have a great day.
Thanks, Matt.